Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Scyushi, and we are back again with some more Trove to Trove, and it's about time. We finally are getting to the Revenant 2019 tutorial video. So this is going to end up being the definitive tutorial talking about this character, how you're going to end up building it for both Shadow Towers and for U10 farming. Now, one thing I want to say before we get started is I don't have ideal stats on this guy. So throughout this video, I'm going to actually swap over to my Shadow Hunter because I have my maxed out physical set of gems on my Shadow Hunter. But these gems are still going to end up applying the exact same way over on the Revenant. So you know, I will end up letting you guys know this is how you're going to build the character, and building it towards Shadow Tower versus building it towards U10 is going to end up being very slightly different. The Revenant has been gaining a lot of popularity lately. I don't know why only recently, because the Revenant actually has had its rework. So basically, if you guys are just tuning into Trove, there's a lot of the characters are still working with the same old code, right? And what the old Trove developers, they've all since moved on. You know, they all got laid off because Tryon Worlds isn't in charge anymore. Now it's Game Ago. But anyways, they were slowly working on all of the classes and reworking them to being something that was actually worthwhile for playing, right? And the Revenant did end up luckily getting a rework and is a powerhouse. You can use it in Shadow Towers very effectively just because the lifesteal on this character is absolutely insane. As far as just U10 is concerned, honestly speaking, folks, you can literally take your powerful physical gems from your Revenant, swap it over to the Neon Ninja, and you'll complete dungeons faster. Just because with the Neon Ninja Rage speed build, links in the description to check that build out, he's just going to end up being the absolute fastest farmer. You can even swap the gems over to the Vanguard and you'll be doing a better job for normal farming. But as far as Shadow Towers are concerned, the Revenant can end up being really good for you. And even if you yourself watching this video want to main the Revenant above all else and even handle U10, well, don't worry. It's not like I'm going to end up ignoring that topic. Now, before we get started with the rest of the tutorial, I would appreciate if you guys would smash like, trying to get obviously this video to end up being the new definitive 2019 absolutely updated, covering all bases tutorial of a character. So anyways, let's get into the gear. The gear that I'm rocking is not ideal, but in all honesty, you're gonna be trying to go for full-on Crystal 3 if you can. You want to have your second or third stat to be movement speed, and you can end up having your fourth or fifth stat be crit damage. So very similar to what I have on this Crystal 3 face on my Shadow Hunter, for example, where the first stat is going to be max health because it's always max health. Then there's light, movement speed, physical damage, crit damage. The reason for this is because the Revenant doesn't actually need it doesn't really need attack speed on this build. I mean, you kind of can end up using attack speed if you want. As far as I recall, actually, since the rework on the Revenant, your basic attack is more important than ever because your shield bash is actually less useful. So scratch what I said about using the crit damage. Maybe you want to move away from movement speed and just go for crit damage and attack speed. However, the build that I'm describing now, where you would have movement speed, is what you would end up using just for normal uber farming, because obviously you're trying to have movement speed is going to be more important than anything else, and crit damage is going to end up being very important just because the raw damage that you're going to end up doing to enemies. But I'd still probably recommend that you end up having attack speed no matter what, just because your basic attack in combination with your number one ability is pretty much where it's at as far as this character's damage is concerned. So anyways, that's how the gear is going to end up being situated. You can just experiment for yourselves if you want to use crit damage or attack speed, but I would recommend you use attack speed as a priority and you swap out your movement speed for crit damage if you're going to Shadow Towers, and you can swap that crit damage out for movement speed when you're just doing normal farming and stuff. Now, the reason I'm on my Shadow Hunter is I just want to show you guys the gems. So let's just say 1, 2, 3 of these gems are all going to end up having the exact same stats. That is where they're going to all have physical damage with 2 pearls, crit damage with 1 pearl, and then no pearls into crit hit, right? And then 1, 2, 3 of the other gems are going to end up having pretty much the exact same thing, but instead we're going to end up having let me actually find one. There it is. 2 pearls in crit damage, 1 pearl into physical damage, and no pearls into crit hit. However, this is important. When you end up finally having enough crit hit that you're at 100%, any extra crit hit is just a waste of time. Like even on my Shadow Hunter, I'm rocking a little bit too much crit hit with 115%. So what I logically should actually be doing is swapping any gems that I have that extra amount of crit hit. I should be swapping that to max health. This is still theoretically talking about the Revenant, but this pretty much applies to any character in the game anyways. Now, as far as your empowered gems are concerned, I'd recommend that all of them are going to end up, like all of the three main colors, we'll talk about cosmic gems in a moment, all the three main colors are going to be 2 pearls physical, 1 to crit damage, and again, that crit hit is going to end up being very valuable. Now, as far as the cosmic gems are concerned, you got 1 of 2 options. Obviously, if you're building towards shadow towers, you're going to end up building it the exact same way as all those other gems, where you can't have crit hit on these gems. Ideally, you're going to have physical damage and crit damage, and then the point is you're going to end up having your pearls rolled into physical damage and crit damage accordingly. But if you're trying to do just normal U10 farming and you're not going for shadow towers, then you're just going to end up building the gems the same as you would with any other character, where you're trying to have 3 pearls into light and nothing else. But again, you can end up having that on you know, other characters are going to be able to just do that job a little bit better. So anyways, that covers the gem situation, right? So as far as allies are concerned, you know, I use Little Bergie just because I like having the cooldown, even though you technically don't really need that. I should actually be using Raptor Berserker just because it gives you more movement speed, but Little Bergie or Raptor Berserker is pretty much your best bet. As far as the potions and everything is concerned, I pretty much always just use Death Defying. You won't have to with this character though. That's actually entirely up to you, because this guy does have insane lifesteal. Pretty much as soon as you attack an enemy, you can end up just draining their health. So you could end up having a life-stealing ally as well if you find that your survivability is just not 100% what you're into. But the lifesteal of the class itself is just naturally going to end up being really, really good anyways. And then as far as your class, your subclass ability is concerned, you know, I'd recommend probably Lunar Lancer if you're just doing shadow towers and stuff, because it gives you that extra damage, gives you extra attack speed and stuff like that. And then if you're just normal farming, you can still use Lunar Lancer, because when you lunar up, you're going to end up having more movement speed. Or you can go for the tried and true 30,000 power rank Knight subclass ability, because that's going to give you a ton of movement speed on a mount. You're going to end up having 125 movement speed, because especially with the Revenant, your movement speed is going to end up being considerably low compared to other characters. And we also have a dodge ability that has a slight stop in the animation right at the end, whereas certain other characters, like if we swap over to the Shadow Hunter, for example, will quite literally be able to roll and just continue moving without having that little pause that happens with the Revenant, right? So again, you know, just to reiterate that the class gem ability is not entirely important with this guy, just because you're pretty much going to hit your number 1. That's going to be doing tons and tons of damage, and then you're just going to be spamming your left click. There was a glitch back in the day where you could literally just tap your number 1 ability over and over and over again, but that has already been patched. So this is pretty much the most optimal way you can end up doing damage, which also, you know, popping your ult here and there from time to time. If you're in Shadow Towers, I'd recommend using the Unyielding emblem if you can spare Sure Strike, just because Unyielding is going to give you that little bit of invulnerability that will kind of save your life just on certain bosses and stuff like that. But for normal Shadow Tower enemies, Death Defying should be fine, just because your lifesteal is going to be so insane. You always want to have Martial Emblem, and again, you know, Unyielding you can swap out for Sure Strike if you don't have the crit hit, because the ideal stats that you're going to be going for is you're obviously trying to get 100% crit hit at the least. Like that's pretty much what you go for any characters. You gotta have 100% crit hit, and then you're going to try and get your crit damage. I think Revenant's one of the characters that actually has a naturally high crit damage compared to other classes. I could be wrong about that, but your crit damage should be extremely high. You should be at least, you know, we're talking full-on end game. You should be at 1.8k crit hit or crit damage, if not higher than that. And then for your physical damage, Revenant, again, I think is one of the characters that ends up starting with a higher physical damage base than most other characters. Barb is a character that I know without a doubt starts with more physical damage than any of the other characters in the game. I think Revenant is in that, you know, in that clump of classes, but I honestly can't tell you, just because most of this is just from player experience and stuff like that, because the game doesn't actually tell you any of this. It's like how the Lunar Lancer has probably the fastest natural walking speed of all the classes, just because he starts with higher movement speed, and as you level him up, he gets more and more movement speed where the other classes don't, right? So as far as your physical damage is concerned, I'd recommend, you know, anywhere between like 200k and up is going to end up being okay for you. You know, you can get as high as like 350k just because of how well he scales, and that's pretty much going to end up covering the Revenant. Like, there's not really anything else to talk about, honestly speaking. Just again to reiterate, you're going to end up taking pretty much just non-stop damage if you're doing shadow towers, and then if you're trying to end up building for U10, obviously you're gonna swap some of your stats out for more movement speed focused, and also having light as a stat that you have on all of your gems, because again, for your gear, you don't really need to focus on you know, your right click, your class gem ability. You're pretty much just going for your class gem ability for the simple fact that it's a free and powered gem. You know, it's not like you need it. You could end up using whatever other gem you want, honestly speaking, because your right click's not going to be that good. But if you're strong enough, you should be able to do a couple right clicks in a dungeon, and maybe it'll end up being faster than just doing your base attack combo, but not necessarily for shadow towers. And this character doesn't actually have any energy, so you don't gotta worry about that as well. And then again, if you don't already know, the Revenant actually has a passive ability where when you die, you pretty much have one free life, and then a Spectre will end up coming out and kind of saving your life, and then it's on cooldown. You can tell by the smoke that ends up arriving around your character. And yeah, hopefully that ended up covering everything that you guys wanted to know about this guy. In all honesty, I'd love to try maining him just because he does seem like a lot of fun. I know that he's a powerhouse in Shadow Towers. I know that, guys. But I don't really see myself maining him just because I, for the majority of my game, am just farming U10. And even then, you know, I already swapped off my Neon Ninja for the Shadow Hunter just because I love the Shadow Hunter so much. But the Shadow Hunter is not nearly as fast at clearing dungeons as the Neon Ninja. And further down the list, I would say that Revenant is actually even slower than the Shadow Hunter for clearing dungeons, just because, well, I don't know. I mean, he's got the damage, but he doesn't necessarily have the movement. I guess that doesn't really matter with the Knight subclass ability, so there is the possibility I'll try it out in the future at some point. But again, keep in mind that life steal that you have with this character is going to end up saving you a lot. This is pretty much one of the only characters, or one of the only physical characters, I should say. Yeah, come to think of it, I guess outside of Shadow Hunter, because he's ranged, I should say that this is one of the only melee-based characters that can actually end up soloing Ultra Hydra just because of that insane lifesteal, because all the other characters, you're going to get stuck in Hydra's acid at some point. Revenant can legit heal out if you're lucky enough. Like, you'll just keep healing out of his acid. Anyways, again, I hope I covered everything. If I missed anything, be sure to yell at me in the comments. Leave it there. If I catch it, I'll pin it. Otherwise, you guys do me a favor. Thumbs up any of those big tips so that anybody that watches this video long into the future can end up seeing anything that I ended up missing in this topic. Otherwise, have yourselves a great day. Smash like, sub for more. Buy some merch if you want to support the channel. And if you want to see some behind the scenes videos, you can hit that join button down below. Sign on. Stay epic, gamers.